have their works in English, and we are trying to bring them back to where they belong. You know, I'm thinking of a Zimbabwean writer, Ndlovu, who transcreated a collection of short stories in English, Where to Now or something like that, and into Indebele, Sikonde P Manje. And he was saying, I'm trying to demonstrate that African people are creative. It's just that they are creative in wrong languages. And by translating back into the African language, I am enriching African language literature and culture. And you know, when Mhudi was written in English, one Professor Duke said, you know, Mhudi in Setswana would have served a purpose. And one other professor of Setswana said, for all intents and purposes, Mhudi should have been the first Setswana novel. It's a Setswana novel. You know, there is this work by Peter Lenham, which is originally a Sesotho novel written by Mopedi Poulos. And it was published in 1953 as Blanket Boy's Moon, when in fact it should have been first published in Sesotho and have been one of the earliest, greatest works in Sesotho, the greatest after Mofolo's Chaka. Of course, some years later, in 2008, it was reworked, I think, by the same author as Mushanyana Selele Sidi Khudisa, which is also one of the things that has inspired me to push for this reclaiming our works that are written in English by African writers. Now, the other point I would like to make is that we should be celebrating, after what Mr. Mukaya said, we should be celebrating a little, because a little seed that we planted those many years ago is now taking shape and developing into some kind of a baobab. I've just learned that, you know, it's Dr. Mahala, who wrote When a Man Cries, and then rewrote it, I think, in isiZulu as Yakalindod. And that Ndlovu, who transcreated Where to Now into Sikondepi. And Mopedi Poulos as Mushanyana Selele Hudisa. So it's not a Sol Plaikishole Sabata original idea totally. And of course we've had Masisi Kunene's works in Sizulu and in English. They are in English. They are celebrated in English, but they are also available in isiZulu. Just like you will have in Afrikaans, Andre Brink and Dion Meyers. They have their works in other languages of the world, but their works are also available in Afrikaans. So what we are saying is, there's nothing wrong in writing in a European language, but please make your work available to your people in their native language, which is also your native language. And like Masisi Kude, you write in your native tongue, and if you want a wider audience, you translate your work. Because by writing in English, really, it's depriving your African people of your creative excellence. I think I will pause here, or maybe just answer a few questions. I know there will be a few questions on the major concepts like repatriation and Petzolelo, if needs be. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Prof. Thanks so much, Prof, for shedding some light about this project. Yeah, the little seed is developing into a baobab. Those are not my words, they are your words, Prof. Let us hear Tuelo Khabunewe telling us about this baobab. I'm aware that he wrote a book in English and he later changed it, he transcreated it into our language. Tuelo, the the stage is yours. Please tell us about that baobab when you co-first it in Setswana. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Mulwele. It is a beautiful day. I'm very happy to be here today to be talking about such an enormous project, the repatriation of letters. Just to give you some background as to how I became involved in the project, I received a call from my brother Sabata about 4 or 5 years ago when he originally pitched the idea to me to say, I've had a conversation with Professor Shole and we've been thinking about this. This is what we want to do. And, just explaining the rationale behind it. And obviously then he starts telling me about, the kinds of books and the titles of books that he wanted to involve in the project. I started hearing names like Sol Plaatje, names like Ellen Kuzwayo, names like Bessie Head, names like Agiso Lesego and Martin Kuboikai, who are big hitters. I mean, these are enormous names, and these people have been around for years and years. They've done a lot of great work around language development and around writing in general. And I'm thinking that, my name is Tuelo Gabonewe, I'm still a young man, I'm still fairly new in the writing world, and I still have a long way to go to get even close to touching some of the achievements and some of the accolades that some of those names have been able to achieve during their lifetimes. But obviously, it's very important work, and I understood why the work had to be done and why it had to be done at the time that it needed to be done. Dr. Mulwele, we have put English on a pedestal, and English has very cunningly and very smartly positioned itself as one of the most important languages in the world. I mean, I work in a bank, and in the corporate environment, we speak quite a bit about positioning, concept. And positioning is basically where you controlling the narrative about how to perceive you, how to see you, and what you want them to understand about yourself. And so, in my opinion, we are basically standing up and positioning Setswana, first of all, as a language that's got everything that you need from a language. It can teach, it can enlighten, it can tickle, it can explain, it can expound, it can shock, it can do everything and anything that any other language anywhere on the planet can do. And so, Yaga Motswana, Godileng a bua Setswana, I felt it was my responsibility to be involved in this project and to come back home and to start writing in my language. Because writing is a way of preserving our language, and writing is a way of making sure that our language doesn't disappear, that our language remains in use, and that we teach the next generation and we make this language available for them so that the language is around for many, many years to come. So as you rightly pointed out in the beginning, that the title of my book that I eventually translated into Setswana was sarcophagus, which is a huge Greek word. And so my thinking at the time that I was writing the book was, I wrote it as my dissertation for the MA in creative writing that I was doing with that university at the time. And obviously you want to go big, you want to pass cum laude, you want to outshine everybody who's doing that program at the same time that you are doing it. And so, the writing was a bit all over the place. My first book as well was also written in English. And my thinking has always been to say, there are more people on the planet who speak English versus, the number of people that speak Setswana, which is my home language. And I am glad that I got the opportunity to be involved in the repatriation of letters project, because all those myths have been debunked. I have realized that I wasted about 4 or 5 years of my career doing something that ultimately hasn't benefited me in any way. The writing project, when I started working on the Setswana transcreation, when I started working on the first draft, was the most liberating experience of my entire writing career. And even though, the first draft never got to see the light of day, because obviously the repatriation of letters project is headed up very brilliantly by Professor Shole, who was just on the podium now and who has spoken beautifully. about, repatriation and how the idea came about, and those conversations that he had with Professor Malope back in the day, and many others who have a vested interest in the preservation of our languages. So I did the first draft, and the mistake I made at the time, instead of approaching this as a transcreation project, which basically means that I'm the author of the story. I know what happens, I know the characters, I know everything that happens in there intimately. So what I needed to do at the time was sit down and rewrite the story without necessarily referencing the English text. But obviously, that is not what I did. So it was literal translation in the beginning, word for word translation, line by line translation from English into Setswana. So I did that. That was my approach. I finished the first draft and I sent it into Prof as the leader on this project for his opinion. And Prof was unrelenting and uncompromising in the feedback that he provided to me at the time to say, we are not going to work with this. We don't want you to go and translate word for word what was written in English, because we're trying to repatriate this and bring it back to its original linguistic base. This is a Setswana story. It is your story. You understand it inside out. Go and rewrite the story without even once taking a glance at the English text. And the second experience was even more liberating than the first, because all the shackles were off. I don't have to try and find meaning for what does a sarcophagus mean in Setswana. I don't have to try and translate every little word in that book, but I had to go and find new ways of retelling the story and bringing it back to the people that I intended to read in the very beginning. And obviously there are other titles in the project that will be coming out in due course. Uslorato is on the course. She'll be coming on the podium shortly to talk about her experience in this project. But for me, it has been the most liberating experience of my entire writing journey, and long may it continue. I think I will pause here and hand back to you, Dr. Mulwele, if you have any further questions or if you'd like to bring others into the conversation as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Really, I'm agreeing with you that our languages will never die for as long as we have people of your caliber, people that still think that Setswana is important. But we need to change the culture. We need to change our culture. Maybe people are writing in other languages because they don't have readers. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe we are a nation that does not. When we're waiting for the bus at the bus stop there, we chat and make a lot of noise and maybe look at our phones, whatever. We don't take the books from our handbags, from our pockets. We don't read. There's something that I like about whites. I'm giving them 10 out of 10. And please don't slaughter me. Don't cut my neck for saying that. When they are at the surgery waiting for the doctor, you would see them reading a book. When they are waiting for the bus or for the train, you see them reading a book. Because reading widens the horizon. It was said earlier on that when you read, when you are a writer, you need to read even more for you to be able to write. But we need to change the culture. I don't know how will we do it, but it needs to be done. That our people should start to take reading very seriously. Thanks so much, Bello, for the wonderful presentation. You've just mentioned that you wrote it and sent it in, but the professor took it back. He kicked it. In fact, he kicked it out because it didn't represent a transcreated work. It didn't represent it was a pure translation, word for word. Because if you were to change, to move it from English to Setswana, and a simple word like good afternoon, and you want to change it in Setswana, good afternoon, you would maybe say something like that. I don't know. It doesn't even give sense in our language, So it is important that we should have projects such as this, that will help us to have more books. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. That was wonderful. Let us ask May Rock to also share her experiences, because there is a book that she also transcreated or recreated, if you like, from English to Spanish. Melrat, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulwele, Dr. Mulwele Kyaleboha. My name is Lorato, and I was actually roped in, or I came in quite a little bit later in the project when it was already in, and I mean, it was no brainer that I was going to say yes to Sabata. It's actually just so easy to say yes to Sabata because he always comes up with this beautiful project, Professor Shole. So my background in literature is mostly in early literacy, is the majority of it. So my primary work is in children's literature. And it started off in actually translating when I was working as a children's librarian at Robert Moffat, Kuruman Moffat Mission in the Northern Cape, in my hometown of Kuruman. When I was translating, I was working in the library where a lot of children's books were in English, and there was nothing for the teachers who were the ones who were coming to the library from surrounding preschools in rural towns in Kuruman, rural villages in Kuruman. And I just took upon myself to I didn't know at the time, because Prof came with this word, I didn't know at the time that I was transcreating, but I was, because I was translating those books in the library, but I was translating them in a way that I was retelling the stories into Setswana from the English stories that they were, because they could not relate to the village teachers and the children who were taking those books out. So I was actually transcreating before transcreating was a thing. And that was what I was doing. And I did a lot of books in Setswana. So for me, it was mostly children's books that I was doing, but I have done a lot of this. So when I was asked to do this transcreation project, Prof. Shole, Sabata, I was really, really excited. But I also felt that it was going to be a daunting task because it was something new. And as you know, as Tuelo has said, or Prof, maybe not strict, but Prof is very professional and wants things, to be in a way that, Libo Sabata is, things need to come out in a way that and transcreation for me at the time was a new, and taking Lesego's book, this is the book that I transcreated, Kagiso Lesego Molope, and the fact that it had won so many awards, I was scared. I must say that I was really scared that I wasn't going to do justice to it, that I was just going to be an imposter. I had that imposter syndrome came and say, oh my God, am I going to do the right thing, and so on. But the way Prof explained it, that don't think about the English, forget about the English text, read the book once and just recreate it for the Botswanas, for the new constituents who are going to be reading this as people who speak Setswana as first language Setswana. And that became so much easier because I think that the process of translation was going to be the one that was going to be a daunting task. But then the fact that I had to recreate the story from just understanding the gist of the story and going through, and I didn't want, because it's such a powerful book, for me, I thought that it was also such a powerful book as a Black woman writing this book, because I felt that it had some elements of feminism and gender-based violence and all the other elements that we are dealing with in our country especially. And I had to make sure that I put it out in a way that Lesego has also written it, so that it doesn't veer off from the message that it was, because the message was so powerful, and that's what happened. So I recreated the story, thinking about Black Botswana women or Botswana women who are going to be reading this book. Ke bua ka di-terms tsa GBV in Setswana and so on that are not in English, that I understand from me being a Motswana person, not thinking about the English words and so on. So it was just a process that I thought that it really, really, really brought out the best in the way you write your language, in the way I was writing Setswana. It was, I mean, it's the first project that I've been involved with where I had to really, really like take so much or bring so much from my writing, because I've never been, my writing has always been for children, and you must listen to this. People think that writing for children is easy. It's not. It's actually the most difficult form of writing if you are going to be writing for children. So I told myself that if I can write for that young audience, I'm sure I can do this. Because when you write for children, you don't have the privilege of text as compared to when you write a novel or when you write for adults or when you write a nonfiction book where you've got all this research and you've got all these words that you can do. With children, it's 32 or 500, 200 words, and that is, and you must make sure that you stay in there. And children are the most, they criticize you, not criticize in a way that, but if they don't like your story, then it's tickets for you. If you write for children and then you read the story for them and it's like, nah, that's it. You're not going to come back from that. So I think that I had prepared myself, as an author of children's literature, I prepared myself mentally for any other project that I was going to take upon. So when this transcreation, Yaha Profoli Sabata came along, it wasn't a walk in the park, but I was happy to be a part of it and do something else that I have never done before, which was different from the whole career, my career path that I was in most of the time as a children's author and so on. So for me, it's like, this is, like Prof said, this is not something which has happened before. But I think that the way that it was done by Prof. Sabata, the way Prof ran the workshop for us and so on, it really was just an affirmation that we are capable of writing in our languages. There's been so many things that we've been told that we are not able to create meaningful literature in our languages. And that has not been true, because most of the time people write, I have heard people say that I don't write in Setswana or in Xitsonga because no one is going to write or to read my books. And that's not the case. And also we have been gaslighted by publishers for a very long time that they don't publish books or our stories because they don't sell. That is not the case. I always say that, this argument is so old. It's not true. We know that people don't want to read something that they don't relate to. If you are going to be producing books that are European all the time, you bring them to more than 80% of the population in South Africa, and you expect them to relate to those stories, then there's going to be that projection that people want, that's what people want to read. And that is not the case. I have also been just reading a lot of Setswana books that are beautifully written. Sabata writes beautifully, Tuelo writes beautifully. I've read children's stories that have been written and even translated beautifully in the Setswana language and other African languages as well. So that is not the case. So for the many times that for all this time that we are going to be doing projects like this, it really is an affirmation that our languages matter and we can write in our languages in a way that the literature can also be celebrated, not just being put for and that's it. They can't go to bookshops for the masses, for more people to have access to them and so on. So this project really opened my eyes. Also, it also opened my eyes in terms of what else I can do besides what I've been doing in my career all this time. It opened my eyes in a way that I know now that there's many things that I can do. I can create stories from another story as well. So I don't want to go on and on and on about this project. I think Tuelo, Sabata, and Prof, everyone else has said a lot that can be said. And for me, that's the fact that this book is also will be available soon. Sabata maybe will have more information on what's next, but I have completed the translation. Thank you, Dr. Molweni. And
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Silrat. Thanks so much. And you know, I'm happy that you brought that book so that people see what you did. I don't seem to see Prof in the room. I wonder whether he's still there, because I wanted to ask him this simple question, just to tell us the difference between Phetolelo and Phetolelo, because the two are not similar. And I'm happy that Sabata is here. He mentioned to me this morning that he would, after his presentation, be recused, but he is still here. I'm putting him on the spotlight. He is going to answer that question that was supposed to be answered by Ndate Shole. Sabata, what's the difference between Phetolelo and Phetolelo? Because I heard Prof. Shole saying this is a Phetolelo, this is a Phetolelo. So what's the difference? Sabata?
Thank you so much, Dr. Molweni. I think what I need to do is to actually read from Professor Shole's chapter in a book titled Solplakis Mohudi History, Criticism, Celebration, in which he talks about Phetolelo, because he came with a concept and he needs to be given credit for that. And so this is what he says, and he was referring to Phetolelo in relation to Mohudi, the repatriation of Mohudi back into its linguistic base. And so this is what he says. Mohudi, like all African literary works, linguistically exiled in the languages of European colonialists, needs to be reclaimed and reimagined in the native language of its author and his people through a special form of translation, a repatriative transcreation. And then he came with the Setswana word Phetolelo, which is derived from Phetola, which means to revert, to flip, turn inside out or upside down, make a turnaround. A concept which he says is a concept of translation as a means of recapturing that which was lost. So there is a Setswana proverb, a cow never strays or stays away from home until its horns degenerate or turn inside out. So in other words, Phetolelo is a form of translation where you are bringing back home. What we are doing with repatriation of letters is to Phetola instead of Fetola. Fetola being normal translation between languages. In this case, there is a massive theory of repatriation. Hence, it must be a book written in English, but translated to the author's own language, not to any other language, but to the author's own language, which means in the case of Korapetse Khostile, for instance, instead of him talking about a god with a wet nose, if you are a Motswana reading a poem with that light, you will know, with that line, you will know that he's talking about Modimo Wankwe Metsi. So he's referring to a cow. And so when you translate back into his language, you are, in other words, restoring that was lost through translation into English, because the idea is that when you are not English speaking, but you are writing in English, you create your stories in your mother tongue first, and then later on write them in the second language, which is English. And Petsolelo is a process of bringing back, of repatriating. Hence, Professor Shole said it means to revert, to turn inside out, using that Setswana proverb, it never stays away for so long until its horns degenerate.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
you so much. Thanks so much, Ndapi Mukai. That is well said. In wrapping up, I have a few questions, and such questions are going to be answered by any of the panelists. What will happen to the books? Do you see them being prescribed in schools? I'm happy that it was mentioned earlier on that one of the books already is being used at this university, which is a good thing. Will we have the Northern Cape, the Gauteng, and the Northwest, and other provinces that have Setswana in their schools to prescribe these books? That's one. And how did you choose the books to be recreated? How did you choose the books to be rehomed? How did you choose these books to be repatriated? That's 2. 3. Where to from here? Are you done? Are you done, or will you still be identifying other books that you would be working on in the future? Those are the questions.
Okay, let me attempt, and then fellow panelists will then take over. One is that we looked for books that are in wide circulation, that are written in English by Setswana-speaking authors. We're still looking for more of those. They are not many. You can count with both your hands and your feet, and you will not fill up. You will not take all your fingers and toes. So this was basically, we looked around and we took what we found at that time, and we're also limited by the amount of funding we got from the Northern Cape Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, and also the number of willing translators. You know, Dr. Molwele, that it was so difficult to find translators. And we had to negotiate with all of you. Professor Scholl and I had to negotiate with all of you because you are busy, you're writing your own works, your own dramas, you are teaching at university and so on. So basically the criteria to choose was just go out into the field and see what you can find and bring it home. That was the first one. Secondly, our hope is that these books will be taught at Setswana speaking universities and Setswana teaching universities and schools. When we asked for funding from Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, we asked for funding that included the printing of 350 copies of each title. And this means that every library in the Northern Cape province of South Africa will have one of those titles, repatriated titles. Secondly, that 2 copies will be donated to each of the Setswana teaching universities in South Africa, as well as the University of Botswana. So this means that in the Northern Cape, in the libraries in the Northern Cape, people are covered already. Setswana teaching universities, they will have 2 copies each at each Setswana teaching universities, from TUT to CUT, Northwest University, and so forth. So that's where we are. We are also hoping that we will have the funds to go on phase 2 of this, because we have been identifying other books. Kopa no Matwa speaks Setswana, she writes in English. So we keep on identifying other books. There are not many, but the hope is that we will move to phase 2. This was phase 1. We wanted to see if it will work, and it is a resounding success when you look at the launch of the first fruit, really, Sika Fayabaning. When you look at the academic interest in this project from as far as Austria and the US and so forth, because it has never been done before. People have been talking about translation, but we are talking about repatriation. We are repatriating, we are bringing back that which was lost. The same as it is happening with African artifacts at the British and museum, French museums and so on that have to come back home. We also rehoming stories that are ours, and where we find idioms and proverbs and songs that have been directly translated or over-explained in English, we simply say, no, let us free them from those chains. Yeah, so that's what I think is going to happen from now on. We move into phase 2, hoping is that other universities will teach these books and schools as well, because now the pool is getting bigger. We don't have to be teaching. I mean, Northwest University has been teaching Hakimodisa, which I wrote for 5-6 years. Surely they can now look elsewhere, because there is now Tuelo Khabone, where Lorato Trok would have given them work and so on. So the pool is bigger than before.
Thanks so much, Dad. Thanks so much. That is well said. I see Prof. Shole's hand is up. Professor, Reshole?
Let me just check. Yeah. Yes. I think it's not only the schools that should be targeted for readers. I think we need public readers as well, because this is done for them as well. And I can tell you there are many more works that would need Dr. Molwele with 50 fingers project. By the way, we have not touched Botswana as yet. We have not touched Mphahlele as yet. We have not touched Mda. And there are works also from Nigeria. I mean, a man of the people. It's one such works that we, written in Setswana, would read like a novel about Julius Malema or somebody.
Have you learned that, Prof?
Other languages, other South African languages, I hope they catch on the fever. But also what I just needed to mention is that, I was excited when I was doing literature research, when I was supervising Dr. Powe's thesis, theorizing the transcreation of Mhudi into Setswana, that somebody was working on the same title and on the same title for an article, and the article was published. Pardon? Am I okay? Hello.
You are audible. You are audible, Prof. You may go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. That somebody else has just published an article in the journal about theorizing translation as a repatriative, cultural repatriation, which means this idea has been there all along and waiting to be discovered and explored, and there's potential for it to catch up. Like Sabata says, I think some universities will be developing modules on the same thing. And Ngugi, who is also encouraging translation among African languages with his, he calls it a network translation model, that you should translate between Swahili, Yoruba, Setswana, and so on.
You keep breaking, Prof, but I think you've made your point. Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the session. We started a bit late, and I think we are well on our 1 hour. I hope now we can take the reins back to Jeanette. As Jeanette, over to you.
Thank you so very much. You know, this is one of the discussion of our days of reclaiming. You know, students are now talking about decolonization. They say they want decolonized knowledge. Dr. Mbambotata earlier spoke about, you know, the scenes where we couldn't understand, the British scenes, you know, in the stories that we read that we couldn't resonate with, and the need for African languages, you know, where they describe our own settings. You know, when you spoke about Muhudi, I remember there was one title, Muhudi, that I read, I think at university, but it was in Setswana. I forgot. And then, you know, books like Luhudu, Yo Dintsontsho tsa Lerato, Masaika Teganga Magodimo, all those books, you know, we are not celebrating them, but I think this project is making that fertile ground now to say, you know what, bring all those books to the fore so that the next generation can learn, you know, especially in our indigenous languages. And the minute we put our languages on a pedestal, our students will be able to learn computer science in Setswana, you know, economics in Setswana. Can you just imagine the wealth that is going to come out of such a initiative? Because now it starts in smaller ways where, you know, we are reclaiming, repatriating, rehoming what belongs to us for the next generation. So I just want to thank everyone who was involved in this discussion. Dr. Molwele, thank you very much for steering the discussion. Professor Shole, I almost said it in English. So really for unpacking, you know, the concept of rehoming and repatriation, the process. So it has been really a breathtaking experience for all of us. You know, it brought us back home to our originality as who we are as African people of Setswana descent as well. They have benefited a lot out of the discussion. Ntate Sabata Mugai, thank you so much. Professor Ismail Mataga, I don't think I saw him. Melerato, you did an amazing work. You did an amazing work for translating those books for our young ones. Congratulations and well done. Mr. Tuelo Khabon, really, I can't even express, you know, the gratitude, you know, from what you have really shared with us. So colleagues really at the Sol Plaatje University, well done. Well done. We are going to order the books. Definitely, we are going to have them in our collection, and we might invite some of you for the launches, to launch the books, especially noting that now we are moving into promoting African languages. So from this session, thank you very much. We are going to have a comfort break. Let us start at 1 o'clock. The next coming session will start at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much, colleagues. Let's meet at 1 o'clock. Thank you. We are proceeding with this session after a comfort break. We are going to have 3 authors taking us through their books. However, the session will be facilitated by Ms. Tidi Mungwe, and she's from Creative Books. So the authors are Dr. Kidiboni Gladys Mukwena, Mr. Musa Izulu, and Mr. Tieselani Bevula. So let me not take the limelight. I'm going to request Ms. Tidi to take over this session, and then let us all get immersed in the wealth that we are going to experience. Ms. Tidi, over to you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It is great to be, it's actually an honor to be part of this event. I'm looking forward to engaging with the fellow authors. You know, when you go through hardship, you only have 2 options. You either fall apart or you rise above it. Our panelists made a choice to rise above adversity. Please allow me to introduce the panel, ladies and gentlemen. We have Gladys Kidibone Mukwena. Dr. Mukwena is a senior at the University of South Africa's Department of Arts of Adult Education and Youth Development. Her teaching career dates as far back as 1977 as a primary and high school teacher. She believes in lifelong learning. In Setswana, she says, "Thuto ga e kgolelwe." She acquired her matric certificate at the age of 26 and her doctoral degree at the age of 62. She earned a National Teaching Award in the category of ABET Best Educator. She has presented research papers nationally and internationally in a form of journal articles and book chapters. That is Dr. Gladys Kidibone Mukwena. We also have Mr. Musa E. Zulu. Mr. Zulu is a self-published author, award-winning entrepreneur, international artist, celebrated motivational speaker, and prominent disability activist in South Africa. He achieved his honors degree in sociology at University of KwaZulu-Natal in 1993. He lectured in the Faculty of Humanities before moving to the corporate world as a human resource manager. Lastly, it's Mr. Tiselani Bevula. Mr. Tiselani Bevula is a media studies graduate who worked as a publisher, media analyst, writer, and editor in different media companies. He is an expert in public relations, digital marketing, and promotions. He is the founder and managing director of Bevula Media, a company that publishes books for aspiring and upcoming writers. He has written extensive opinion pieces in leading newspapers and magazines in South Africa. I welcome you to the panel, leaders. Dr. Mukwena, your book, Resilience in Adversity, speaks to our theme, which is rising above life's challenges. You experienced adversity from childhood to adulthood. Would you like to take us through that, Dr. Mukwena?
Thank you, program facilitator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With the book fair, CEN Free Sol, allow me to borrow Thabo Mbeki's words. He says, "Today it feels good to be an African." My view of rising above life challenges is captured in the title of my book, Resilience in Adversity, just launched on Friday, 29th October 2021. Reflecting back on the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, where there were lots of uncertainties in our lives, this for me was an opportune time to reflect on my life journey. And I put it on paper and pen. It is amazing how, as I was writing the book Resilience in Adversity, the phrase, "adversity paves the way, let resilience be your voice," it kept on coming back to mind time and often. And that is when I knew that the contrasting words, resilience and adversity, would be used as a compass to direct the 19 chapters written in the book. Growing up as a young girl without a father, because he chose to abandon mother, I realized must struggle to raise her children. in a poverty-stricken home. As early as 7 years of age, I chose to find strength in my aunt's husband, who really played a father figure in my life and contributed to shaping me positively early on in my life. Going back to the title, Resilience in Adversity, there are several incidents of adversity, which include experiencing ridicule from a primary school teacher, lack of school essentials. It was difficult, but I was determined early on in age to give the best of myself in school performance. Taking the father figure forward, my children were unfathered, not because their father abandoned them, but a silence chose to step him to death at an early age of 29. Yet another adversity. Without any preparations, I experienced widowhood and had to raise 2 children single-handedly. It is these adverse events that made me realize that seeds of faith are always within us. It only takes a crisis of widowhood, a crisis of ridicule, a crisis of depression to nourish this seed so that it grows. As if that was not enough, I found myself experiencing gender-based violence from 3 male strangers in my own home. It is here that my study partner was shot to death. I was shot in the upper arm, and in the bullet up to now is still lodged in the upper arm. Hence, you see that adversity runs like a golden thread in my book, Resilience in Adversity. Currently, my arm is not fully functional because of the foreign element used to support it. However, it's an adverse situation, but I'm forever grateful that I can use my arm to cuddle my grandchildren and perform my pastime, that is doing gardening chores. This for me is seeing adversity as courage. Adversity does not discriminate. Adversity is part of life. It's up to us, or up to one, to choose to be inspired by courage. My life experiences, I believe, did not happen in vain, for I have developed empathy to make a difference through my teaching in adult learning centers, giving students support virtually or face-to-face in higher learning institutions, as well as supporting offenders to say correctional facilities are there. It's a societal responsibility. We must remold them so that they are accepted back into the community as better persons. Allow me, Metsidi, to sum up the book Resilience in Adversity with the Latin phrase, per aspera ad astra, which means through adversity to the stars. Adversity has the power to instill resilience in each one of us. For that reason, I encourage all of us to rise above life's challenges. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. Mr. Musa Izulu. My brother, you found yourself faced with one of the most difficult challenges one can be faced with, which is disability. How did you rise above that? Mr. Zulu, am I audible, colleagues? The title of your book, Trapped in Love, resonates with me because I have found myself being a prisoner of love twice. In my marriage and later on in another relationship. So what is your definition of being trapped in love? It's very interesting, and I'd really like to know what propelled you to write this book. Yes, it's fiction, but as a man, what is it that propelled you to write a book about gender-based violence? Mr. Tislani, is he also not connected?
Hello?
Good day, Mr. Bevula. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh.
I just mentioned that the title of your book, Trapped in Love, resonates with me as a woman who found herself being a prisoner of love twice, yes, in my marriage and later on in another relationship. So it's interesting for me to know what propelled you to write this book, because I understand the book is based on gender-based violence.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The book is based on gender-based violence. So what propelled me to write this book was growing up, I experienced gender-based violence firsthand. Growing up, I was raised in a violent family. So in most cases, when we talk about gender-based violence, it is always a victim who is always talking about gender-based violence, or it's always a woman, because mostly men are the biggest perpetrators of gender-based violence. So what propelled me to write this book was to say, let me take people through what I've experienced about gender-based violence from a man's perspective, because I'm a man, but I'm writing about gender-based violence. Yes. So what I told myself was, I was tired of hearing every day people talking about gender-based violence, people talking about men are trash, people talking about all these cases of women and children who are violated every day. So what I wanted to highlight was to say, what are the root causes of gender-based violence? And what are the symptoms to say someone is trapped in love and trash? So here I'm talking to all the people who are trapped in toxic relationship to say, if you see these signs, if you see these red flags, you have to come out before it is too late, before you come another statistics of gender-based violence. Yeah, just to sum up what propelled me to write this book.
All right, so the book is an account of your personal life experience, which you wrote in fiction.
Yes, the book is inspired by a true story of what happened when I was growing up. So it is not necessarily an account of what happened to me, but it is an account of how gender-based violence starts, because I've seen it with my father. My father used to violate all of us. He used to beat my mom. He used to beat us as children. So I'm showing people that gender-based violence is deep-rooted in culture, because there is this thing of saying a man is the head of the family. So when the man is the head of the family, he wants to control the family with whatever means he has. So that includes using violence. So here I'm documenting how parents who practice gender-based violence, who violate their partners and violate their children, those things can be normalized when children grow up. Children see those things and then they learn something, and then when they grow up, they become another perpetrators of that gender-based violence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buvula. Dr. Mukwena, you are an epitome of resilience. There must be a seed that was planted within you. I mean, you've experienced so much hardship. So I'd like to know what seed was planted within you in your childhood that enabled you to rise above every single adversity that you faced.
Thank you, program facilitator. Growing up, I was raised by a very resilient woman. Actually, in the book, I narrate about the events that took place just before I was born. A year before I was born, the Freedom Charter was launched in South Africa. And in 1956, I'm sure what comes to all of us is the Great March of the Women of 1956. At that time, I was 2 months old. My mother could not join the masses because I was still an infant. But I believe as she was feeding me with her milk, the milk that came out of her breast was just no ordinary milk, but there was resilience, the nutrients of resilience. I sucked them from my mother's breast. Because as she was feeding me, she was meditating, praying for fellow women to be able to present the memo to J.G. Stradom. As I was growing up, I used to have lessons indirectly and directly from this phenomenal woman. We used to stay under the pomegranate tree. This is where she would use things like calabashes to teach me about the significance of comparing the calabash to the form of a womb. At that time, they had already paid lobola for me. So she was giving me the education that as you are joining the family of Mukwena, I give you the permission to bring life. Remember, the calabash is shaped like a womb, to bring life into this family. And we can also put water into this calabash. The calabash, the water symbolizes life. To say, where there is sadness, let your presence brings light. And the seed of resilience, I think, as I said earlier, the characteristic of empathy grew in me to say, Although I experienced rejection from my teachers, I want to be a teacher to make a difference in my students. So it is through my teaching that when they are experience a limey situation, I take those limes and use the letters the other way around and give smiles to my students. So I would say I am striving to take the negatives I have experienced, to take out something positive out of it, to make a difference in others. And for me, that is resilience in adversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. Mr. Bevula.
Yes.
They say broken people break others. I say being broken is a part of life. Staying broken is a choice. Breaking others is also a choice. So you are a living testimony of this. You actually witnessed your mother being abused, right?
Yes.
So, however, yes, you made a decision that you are not going to follow in the steps of your father. Instead, you are going to become a man that the world is longing for. So what would you say to a man who abuses women and justifies his action with what he experienced in his upbringing?
Okay, what I can say to men who are abusers out there is to say, there is always a choice in everything, and there is no amount of justification you can give to abusing someone. Even if there is so much going on in your relationship, sitting down and talk to your partner is always the best way, because we can have so many problems in our relationships, but we must be able, at the end of the day, we must be able to sit down and say, let's sit down and see if we can be able to talk this one out through conversation without using violence. So I'm telling all men around the world or around South Africa to say, as men, we must be responsible enough. We must know that abusing someone is not good. We must know that we can choose not to follow suit. Like you said, with in your example, that I saw my father beating my mother, but I could tell, even as young as I was, that this was wrong. So we must tell men that it is wrong to beat up women, it is wrong to beat children, because no one wants to be hurt. No one wants to be hurt physically or emotionally. So everyone wants to have a good life without being hurt by the other person. So let's just be responsible and leave violence aside, and then we use communication to resolve our issues.
Thank you, Mr. Bavula. Back to Dr. Mokoena. Dr. Mokoena, it is clear that your mother modeled good behavior to you. What values are you instilling in your children, whom you mentioned earlier, when you said, as wounded as your arm is, you are still able to hug, you are grateful that you are still able to hug your children and your grandchildren. So what values are you instilling in your children and grandchildren?
Thank you. One of the values that I strive to instill in my children and grandchildren is doing small things with great love. A small thing like, please, thank you, I am sorry, can make this world a wonderful world to live in. Also, I strive to instill the spirit of sharing, because sharing is caring. I often use a symbol of a light to say, if I light a candle to you, TD, I will never lose any light by doing that. A candle does not lose its light by lighting another candle. We can really make a difference if we light candles in our different corners. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. Mr. Bevula, South Africa is known. Mr. Bevula?
Yes, yes.
Yes, South Africa is notorious for its high levels of gender-based violence. Do you think enough is being done to combat gender-based violence in our country? And if not, what can be done? What needs to be done?
Okay. There is not enough that is being done in South Africa to combat gender-based violence. And by saying it is not enough, because the cases are not going down, but they are still going up. So what we need to do is to tell everyone that fighting gender-based violence is the responsibility of everyone, whether you are male or female, whether you are a child or you are a grown-up. But if we can have this continuing dialogue to say, gender-based violence, to fight gender-based violence is a responsibility of each and everyone. In your smallest corner that you occupy, you can fight gender-based violence. If you see it happening, please call it out. If you experience it, go to the relevant authorities that can help you. There are different authorities. Some of them are failing to do their jobs, like policewomen. Even in my book, I indicated it that so many people go to the police stations to report gender-based violence cases, only to be turned out by the police or to be let down by the police or the law enforcement officers. So it requires the responsibility of each and everyone in society to say gender-based violence affects all of us, and it is my responsibility to fight it. So it is through books such as this one, since I can hear my fellow author talking about gender-based violence, it is through reading books such as this one that people get to know more about gender-based violence in order to fight it, because they will be making informed decisions, they will be having that knowledge to fight it. So this book festival like this one are good in highlighting this kind of topics in society, to say people must read. When they read, they will be armed with a lot of information, a lot of knowledge to fight this scourge of the gender-based violence, because it is becoming a pandemic that is so hard to fight. So if people keep on reading, we create that environment for people to read. Platforms like this, they will help us in tackling this problem of gender-based violence.
Yeah, I agree with you. In order for us to conquer this Goliath, yeah, it has to be via collective efforts, from law enforcement agencies and the community. Because I mentioned earlier that I have an experience of being a prisoner of love. I was abused by my husband in my marriage, my ex-husband. When I went to report the case to the police, the first question I was asked was, "What did you do to him?" So as if there's anything that would justify, being physically abused by him. So really, we need to challenge the status quo. And having said that, Mr. Bevula, I agree with what you've just said with regards to people needing to read books. I believe that books such as yours provide both counseling and coaching, because it's not everyone can afford therapy, but if someone reads a book like yours, they get free counseling. Well, not free, they would have purchased the book, right? But they get counseling, which is prevention. Coaching is cure, right? So thank you, Mr. Bavula. Back to Dr. Mokoena. Dr. Mokoena?
Hello?
What? Hello, Dr. Mokoena?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me, Dr. Mokoena?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. What would you say to someone who doubts their potential to achieve their goals, perhaps because they are uneducated or they think they are too old to chase their dreams? So what would you say to a person who has given up on themselves?
My simple message is each one of us has a little light in himself or herself. You may regard this light as insignificant. But I want to say to you, never allow anybody to dim your light. A person who dims another's light, it would be, what do you do with education at your age? Are you reading for obituary? What does it help? Because she's forever reading, but she is not rich. Focus on your dream. Focus on your goal. Be like that woman who was going to fetch water. She focused on the water that she wants to fetch at the river, and she did not care about the noises made by the frogs and the crocodiles. And in that way, you will achieve your goal. After all, age is just a number. Thank you.
Indeed, age is just a number. I mean, you achieved your doctoral degree at the age of 62. So
Yes.
Anything is possible as long as you believe in yourself and you keep going. Back to you, Mr. Bevula. Earlier, you mentioned red flags, that when one gets into a relationship, there are always red flags. So are you saying we ignore the red flags?
Yes, so many people are ignoring the red flags. When they sit down and reflect, they can see that the red flags were there, but they choose to ignore. And then by so choosing to ignore, the situation escalated to such a point that they found themselves trapped in love and trash. What they thought was love now is turning into trash. So the red flags were there. The signs are always there in each and every relationship. Before it becomes toxic, you can see the signs. Maybe the signs might be once he beats you, you can see that he can do it over and over again. So it is time for you to go out when you see those kind of red flags, because once he turns violent, he can always be violent, because he knows that he can come back and apologize and you will forgive him. So once he turns violent, those are red flags that you must consider.
Do you think, though, that it's the red flags that we ignore? Isn't it the brokenness that we overlook, their brokenness and our brokenness?
I don't think it is about brokenness. It is about choice, like I said earlier. There are people who choose to stay in abusive relationships, and I don't know why. It can be maybe you are dependent on that person. So many reasons that can make you to stay. But like I said, it's all about choice. But I encourage everyone not to choose something like that. Don't choose abusive relationship over good and healthy relationships.
Having said that, do you do you believe that a person who is being abused is capable of making sound decisions and choices?
Yes. Like I said earlier, if you have information about all these things, if you read books such as mine and others that talks about toxic relationships, gender-based violence, abusive relationships, it means that when it happens to you, when you get abused, you know what to do. You are in the right state of mind to make a rational decision to say, the best thing here is to walk out before it is too late.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pavula. Back to Dr. Mokoena. Dr. Mokoena?
Hello?
Hello?
I can hear you clearly.
Yes. Matriculants are currently writing their final exams. Some of them have lost confidence in formal education as a result of the high rate of unemployment, especially when it comes to unemployed graduates. What would be your words of encouragement to these matriculants?
My final words to the students is per aspera ad astra. And I'm saying to each one, whatever the circumstance you are facing right now, through adversity, you can reach the stars. Allow your pain to become your passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. So you believe that they can rise above the status quo of the high rate of unemployment?
That's for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. Back to you, Mr. Bevula. With regards to what you alluded to earlier, regarding a woman who stays in a toxic relationship by choice. If a sister of yours or a friend was in a toxic relationship and they came to you seeking advice, you know, what would you say to them? This woman has children with the husband. She's unemployed, uneducated, has nowhere to go. What would you say to her?
I can tell you that no one's life can depend on someone. No matter the situation, she may be uneducated, she may be unemployed, but life still goes on. You can always maneuver whatever the situation, because if you lean on someone too much, when they're no longer there for you to lean on, it is back to zero, because there will be no one to be dependent on. So
yes,
it is early it is good for you to prepare yourself for such situation, to say, I can live without this person. I can live without my husband, even though I have children with this person. Let me prepare life outside this marriage, or let me prepare life outside this relationship, because I may say I'm preserving something for my marriage or for my relationship, only to find out that marriage will be the end of you.
I agree with you, because we often get into relationships because we are running away from something, not towards something, and usually it's a void that needs to be filled. It's an empty cup that we expect the person that we get into a relationship with to fill on our behalf. So I think we would be in a better place as women, or even men, if we could know how to fill our own cups and get into relationships with an overflowing cup. I'm talking from personal experiences. So I agree 100% with what you are saying. Everything that we need already exists inside of us, you know. So yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Bevula. Back to you, Dr. Mokoena. Dr. Mokoena. Dr. Mokoena?
Hello.
Yes, the previous month, the month of October, was Mental Health Awareness Month. And as a result of the adversity that you endured, at some point you found yourself being diagnosed with depression. And you were admitted into a psychiatric ward. What would you say to someone who is going through what you experienced?
Without taking much time of fellow presenters, I would say let us regard mental illness like any other illness. Let us not shy away from depression. Let's come out to the public. Let's seek for help in medical facilities, because the more you suppress it, the more it endangers one's life. I experienced it twice in a decade. And the second time around, I saw depression as fuel for my life journey. So it's an illness like any other. Let us consult and seek out for help. Thank you.
And depression is not a sign of weakness.
For sure.
Right?
Yes.
And we need to treat everyone with kindness, because you never know what the person is going through.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mokoena. Mr. Bevula, in closing, what can you add with regards to gender-based violence? What can you say to a woman who has been listening to the discussion and still feels that she still doesn't have courage to walk away, to let go of the toxic relationship?
Okay. What I can say to that particular woman is, you know, life is a journey. You started somewhere before you met that person. You were living your life before that person. So there are still more people who you will come across when you are living your life in your everyday basis. So develop that courage, because if you don't have that courage, hence they say cowards die many times before they are dead. It means you are a coward. So develop that courage to say, let me go out before this cowardice of mine becomes the end of me, before this cowardice of mine put me in danger or endangers my life. So everyone can develop a courage, no matter the situation, no matter someone told you that if you go out of that relationship, they will kill you. But it is better they kill you for going out, for taking a right decision, not for staying in that relationship, because they may end up killing you even if you leave, even if you don't leave. So develop that courage and go out of that toxic relationship, go out of that marriage, start your own life afresh.
Do you by any chance have a copy of your book with you?
Yes.
Let's see.
Yeah, here is the book. I'm not sure if you can see the book.
No, I can't. Yes, I can see it now.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bevula. Thank you for the words of encouragement. not only to the women out there, but to me as well. I've learned so much from you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for penning down your story. How does one get hold of the book?
Okay, if you want the book, it is there in selected bookstores, especially here in Gauteng, because I'm based in Gauteng. Alternatively, you can call me on 076 019 5951. I can repeat the number again, 076 019 5951. Or people can go to my social media platforms. On Twitter, I am @TBevula. On Instagram is Tselane_Bevula. Facebook is Tselane_Bevula. So people can just call me or go to my social media platforms and then they place an order. And by the way, another book is coming. So now I'm taking pre-orders for the new book. I'm still talking
awesome.
about love again.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. No, you're welcome, Mr. Bevula. Back to Dr. Mokoena. Yeah. Resilience in adversity.
Yes.
What would you like to say in closing, Dr. Mokoena?
To the students, our university students, I'm saying to you and any other person who's in the audience, when you look back, you'll find the hardest climbs resulted in the most beautiful views. The circumstance you are facing right now may be sour, but in a year to come, it will be another scenario. Please do not quit. Hold on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mokoena, for the words of encouragement to the youth, the matriculants. How does one get hold of your book?
My cell phone number is 072 955 2974. I will also write in the chat box 072 955 2974. I will give other details on the chat box so that we save time for the other presenters. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mokoena. Thank you, Mr. Bevula, for sharing your stories. Thank you so much for penning down the stories. You know, I always say that as authors, we are a compost, because the function of a compost is to fertilize plants, and that's what you have done by penning down your story, by sharing your African stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Metsidi, for steering this session. I can't stop smiling. You know, I couldn't just stop, you know, because I felt so great. I don't know about other colleagues who are on this call. You know, it was just an amazing experience. You know, I felt like, you know, we are attending a motivational talk more than anything else. You know, when I listened to Dr. Kidiboni, you know, I felt a sense of healing, you know, from, you know, and I think I'm definitely going to get these books. I'm going to have a wonderful Christmas season, like you're recommending, Metsidi. Thank you for steering the ship.
No, you're welcome. Please also get a copy of Present Love.
Yes. All those titles, if they put them in the chat box, and then Monday will get the titles for us as the UFS libraries as well. Yes, Dr. Gidiboni, really your experiences are a lesson to, you know, a fertile, like Metsidi was saying, a fertilizer to other people's lives. Like you were saying, light a candle, you know, your light a candle. Women in the forefront. We need those voices. We need those voices, and thank you for being in the forefront. That story that you have read is going to change another man's life. An abusive partner who wants to hold on but doesn't know how to hold on.